I found my girlfriend's notebook exposed, and what I discovered shattered my world. I captured evidence, grabbed my things, and vanished. 3 days later, she stormed into my bare home yelling my name. I never imagined that a simple Tuesday morning would end with me photographing pages of betrayal and loading my truck with everything that mattered. Isabella and I had been together for 2 years, and I genuinely believed we were building something real together. She was passionate about wellness and fitness, always talking about opening her own retreat center someday, while I focused on my veterinary practice and the inheritance my grandmother had left me. I thought we complemented each other perfectly, her dreams and my stability creating a foundation for our future. That morning, I came downstairs to grab coffee before my early appointments when I saw Isabella's leather-bound planning journal lying open on our kitchen counter. She'd left for her yoga instructor training weekend the night before, and I assumed she'd forgotten it in her rush. I wasn't trying to snoop, but her handwriting caught my eye as I reached around it for my coffee mug. Phase 2, Kyle's grandmother money, timing critical after his promotion, was written in her neat script across the top of the page. My stomach dropped as I read further. The entire page was dedicated to what she called the Kyle strategy, complete with timelines, dollar amounts, and tactical notes. She'd calculated my net worth down to the penny, including my inheritance, savings, and projected income from my recent promotion to senior partner at the clinic. But it got worse. Much worse. I flipped through page after page of her careful planning, each one revealing another layer of manipulation I'd been completely blind to. She documented every conversation we'd had about my grandmother's war medal collection, noting Kyle's emotional attachment to military memorabilia, use for guilt leverage if needed. She'd written detailed character assessments of my family members, identifying which ones might be useful for additional funding sources, and which were obstacles to overcome. My hands shook as I photographed each page with my phone, making sure to capture every cruel detail. The journal revealed her partnership with someone named Diego, whom she'd never mentioned to me. Their plan was elaborate. They'd approach me after my promotion with a business opportunity for Isabella's wellness retreat center, using my emotional investment in her dreams and my inherited money as seed funding. But the retreat was completely fake. They intended to drain my accounts and disappear together, leaving me responsible for any investor fraud charges. "Kyle's so trusting and generous," she'd written. "Perfect mark for this type of long-term investment con. His grandfather's medals will sell for at least $15,000 if we need quick cash during exit strategy. Diego says military collectors pay premium for Purple Heart sets." I stared at that line for a full minute, my vision blurring with rage. Those medals represented my grandfather's sacrifice in Korea, the proudest possession of a man who'd worked double shifts at the steel mill for 40 years to support his family. Isabella knew exactly how much they meant to me, had listened to me tell stories about Grandpa's service at least a dozen times. She planned to steal and sell them like common trinkets. The journal included a detailed timeline starting with my promotion last month. She'd calculated that I'd be most emotionally vulnerable and financially optimistic right after the celebration dinner, which explained why she'd been so affectionate and supportive lately. Every kiss, every "I'm so proud of you," every intimate moment had been theater, designed to soften me up for the financial kill. I photographed the final pages, which included backup plans if I became suspicious, including having Diego pose as a legitimate business consultant and using my veterinary credentials to give their fake retreat medical credibility with potential investors. They'd even researched which of my clients had the most money, planning to approach them as friends of Dr. Kyle, once they had my initial investment locked in. I carefully closed the journal and placed it exactly where I'd found it, then walked upstairs to our bedroom and began packing. Not everything, just the essentials: clothes for a week, my grandmother's jewelry, important documents, my grandfather's medals, and a few irreplaceable photographs. I loaded everything into my truck, along with my laptop and the medical equipment I'd brought home from the clinic. I left my key on the kitchen counter next to her journal and drove straight to my brother's cabin in the mountains, 3 hours away from everything I thought I knew about my life. The entire drive, I kept thinking about all the signs I'd missed, all the times Isabella had forgotten her wallet or needed help with rent, all her enthusiastic questions about my finances that I'd mistaken for genuine interest in our future together. As I pulled into the gravel driveway of the cabin, surrounded by pine trees and absolute silence, I realized I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't calculating expenses in my head or worrying about whether I could afford Isabella's dreams on top of my own responsibilities. 3 days of mountain silence ended with my phone exploding at 2:47 p.m. on Friday afternoon. Isabella's ringtone cut through the peaceful quiet like a chainsaw, and I watched her name flash on my screen 17 times before I finally answered on the 18th call. I'd spent those 3 days hiking, thinking, and planning my next moves while she presumably returned from her fake yoga training to discover our townhouse stripped of my belongings and me completely unreachable through normal channels. "Kyle, what the hell is going on?" Her voice was sharp with panic and barely controlled rage. "Where are you? Why is half our furniture missing? The bedroom looks like it was robbed." I stayed calm, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "I found your journal, Isabella. The one you left open on the kitchen counter." Dead silence. I could practically hear her brain scrambling to figure out exactly how much I knew and what damage control strategy would work best. When she finally spoke again, her tone had shifted to that manipulative sweetness I now recognized as performance. "Kyle, baby, you're misunderstanding whatever you think you saw. That journal is just my private thoughts, my way of working through ideas and feelings. You know how I process things by writing them down." Phase 2. Kyle's grandmother money. Timing critical after his promotion. I quoted her exact words back to her. "Diego says military collectors pay premium for Purple Heart sets. Which part of that was just processing feelings, Isabella?" Her mask slipped completely. "You had no right to read my private journal. That was a violation of my privacy, Kyle. How dare you go through my personal belongings and then run away like some kind of coward instead of talking to me like an adult?" The audacity was breathtaking. She'd planned to defraud me of my inheritance, steal my grandfather's medals, and use my professional credentials for investor fraud, but I was the villain for discovering her scheme. "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm protecting myself from someone who sees me as a mark instead of a boyfriend." "That's not true and you know it. I love you, Kyle." Everything in that journal was just brainstorming, hypothetical scenarios I was exploring. I would never actually do those things. "You're taking creative writing exercises completely out of context." Creative writing exercises. She actually said that with a straight voice, as if detailed financial calculations and partnership agreements with Diego were the same as writing poetry. "Where are you?" she demanded when I didn't respond to her explanation. "We need to talk about this face to face. You can't just disappear and leave me to handle all our shared responsibilities alone." Our shared responsibilities. She meant the rent she'd never actually paid, the utilities that came out of my account automatically, and the lifestyle I'd been funding while she planned to rob me blind. "I spoke to the landlord yesterday," I told her. "Explained the situation and arranged to break the lease early. Your belongings are being packed and moved to a secure storage facility as we speak." "You can't do that. Those are my things. You can't just take my property and hide it somewhere. That's theft. I'll call the police." The moving company is fully licensed and bonded. Everything will be carefully inventoried and stored safely until you can arrange to collect it. I could hear her hyperventilating through the phone. "This is insane. You're being completely irrational. So what if I wrote some things in my journal? People write all kinds of things they don't mean. You're destroying our entire relationship over some private thoughts that were never meant to hurt anyone." "Who is Diego?" I asked. Another long silence. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Your business partner. The one you've been planning the wellness retreat scam with. The one who suggested selling my grandfather's medals for quick cash during your exit strategy." "Kyle, I swear to you, I have never planned to actually do anything that would hurt you. Diego is just a friend from my yoga training who had some business ideas. We were just talking hypothetically about entrepreneurship opportunities. Just talking hypothetically. About using my inheritance money, my professional credentials, and my emotional vulnerabilities to execute an elaborate fraud scheme. About selling my grandfather's Purple Heart. About targeting my wealthy veterinary clients for additional investors." "I need to go," I said. "Don't contact me again. Call please. Don't hang up. We can work this out. I'll explain everything if you just come home and give me a chance to make this right. There's nothing to work out. I know exactly who you are now." I hung up and immediately blocked her number on everything. But Isabella wasn't finished. Within an hour, my phone was ringing again from her sister Carmen's number. "Kyle, what did you do to my sister? She's absolutely hysterical. She can barely speak through the crying." I discovered she was planning to defraud me and I removed myself from the situation, I said calmly. "That's not what happened and you know it. Isabella told me about your fight. You violated her privacy, misinterpreted some personal writing, and then abandoned her without even giving her a chance to explain. That's not how adults handle relationship problems." Carmen had always disliked me, viewing me as not good enough for her successful, beautiful sister. Her tone now was pure contempt, like I was some pathetic loser who'd finally revealed my true colors. "Adults don't plan to steal their partner's inheritance money and family heirlooms," I replied. "They also don't use their partner's professional credentials to commit investor fraud." "You're being ridiculous. Isabella would never do something like that. She's devastated that you could even think such horrible things about her. She loves you, Kyle. She's been planning to propose to you after your promotion celebration." Planning to propose. The manipulation never stopped, not even when she was caught red-handed with documented evidence of her scheme. Carmen continued her attack. "You're acting like a child, running away instead of having an adult conversation. Isabella is scared and alone and you've abandoned all your responsibilities to her. That's not what a man does, Kyle." Carmen's lecture about what a man does was still ringing in my ears when I made the call that would change everything. I contacted our landlord directly and explained that I'd discovered fraudulent activity in my household and needed to break our lease immediately for legal protection. Mr. Peterson had always liked me. I paid rent on time, never caused problems, and had helped his elderly mother with her arthritic cat for free last winter. When I showed him photographs of Isabella's journal pages detailing her plans to use our shared address for investor fraud, he agreed to let me out of the lease without penalty, provided I handled the logistics of Isabella's belongings professionally. That's when I called Premium Moving and Storage, a company I'd used when my grandmother passed away. I explained the situation carefully. I needed a full-service pack and store operation for someone who was temporarily displaced, everything documented and inventoried, stored securely until she could arrange pickup. The cost would be $2,400 for packing, moving, and 3 months of climate-controlled storage. I also had them prepare a detailed invoice of Isabella's unpaid obligations from our 2 years together. I'd kept meticulous records because I'm naturally organized, but also because something had always felt off about her constant financial emergencies. The numbers were staggering: 4 months of unpaid rent totaling $3,200, utilities that came directly from my account for $847, groceries and household expenses she'd promised to split but never did for $800. Add the moving and storage costs, and Isabella owed me exactly $7,247. When Isabella called me the next morning from yet another blocked number, I was ready. "Kyle, they took everything. Complete strangers came into my home and stole all my belongings. This is kidnapping, this is theft, this is completely illegal." "Nothing was stolen," I said calmly. "Professional movers packed your belongings carefully and transported them to a secure, climate-controlled storage facility. Everything has been inventoried and photographed for your protection." "I don't care about inventories. I want my things back right now. Where is this storage place? I'm going there immediately. That information will be provided once your outstanding debts are settled." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "What debts? What are you talking about?" "You owe me $7,247 for unpaid rent, utilities, groceries, and moving expenses. Once that's paid in full, you'll receive full access to your belongings and all relevant storage facility information." "Are you insane? I don't owe you anything. We were partners, Kyle." "Partners share expenses. Partners also don't plan to defraud each other. I have detailed records of every expense you agreed to split but never paid. The moving and storage costs are your responsibility since you necessitated this situation by planning to commit fraud." "I never planned to commit fraud. Stop saying that. You're twisting everything because you're angry and embarrassed about violating my privacy." But her voice was shaking now, losing the confident edge she'd maintained during previous calls. She knew I had evidence, documented proof of her intentions, and that changed the entire dynamic between us. The storage facility requires payment before releasing any items, I continued. That's standard policy for situations involving financial disputes. Everything is safe and secure, but inaccessible until the debt is settled. This is blackmail. You can't hold my belongings hostage over some made-up debt. It's not blackmail, it's accountability. You planned to steal my inheritance, my grandfather's metals, and use my professional credentials for investor fraud. The least you can do is pay for your own moving expenses. Isabella hung up, but the real fireworks started 2 hours later when my work phone rang. Dr. Morrison? This is Elena Gutierrez, Isabella's mother. I need to speak with you immediately about what you've done to my daughter. I'd met Isabella's parents exactly twice in 2 years, both brief encounters where they seemed politely disinterested in me. Elena had always struck me as someone who believed her daughter deserved better than a small-town veterinarian. Now her voice carried the full authority of a mother defending her child. Hello, Mrs. Gutierrez. I'm at work, so I need to keep this brief. You will not keep this brief. You've destroyed my daughter's life over some ridiculous misunderstanding. She's hysterical, her belongings are being held hostage, and you've abandoned her like a coward. This is not how men in our family behave. Our family? I'd never been considered part of their family during the good times, but apparently I was subject to their family standards now. Isabella planned to defraud me of my inheritance money and steal my grandfather's war medals to sell to collectors, I said. This isn't a misunderstanding, Mrs. Gutierrez. I have documented evidence of her intentions. Evidence of what? Some private journal entries that you had no right to read? Isabella explained everything to us, Kyle. She was working through some financial stress by writing down different scenarios. That's not planning fraud, that's therapy. The family closing ranks, protecting Isabella by dismissing her detailed criminal conspiracy as stress management techniques. I wondered if they'd seen the actual journal pages or just believed her sanitized version of events. Mrs. Gutierrez, your daughter's journal included partnership agreements with someone named Diego, detailed timelines for approaching me after my promotion, calculations of my net worth, and specific plans to use my professional credentials for investor fraud. That's not therapy. You're being deliberately dramatic because you're hurt and angry. Isabella loves you, Ka. She was planning to propose after your promotion celebration. Instead of celebrating your future together, you violated her privacy and ran away like a child. Everyone kept mentioning this supposed proposal, as if Isabella's romantic intentions somehow negated her criminal ones. As if planning to marry me made planning to rob me more acceptable, not less. I need to get back to work, I said. Isabella can contact me through a lawyer if she wants to arrange payment for her belongings. A lawyer? You're threatening legal action against a young woman who loves you over some private thoughts she wrote in her personal journal. I'm protecting myself from someone who documented detailed plans to commit fraud against me. If you think that's unreasonable, we don't have anything more to discuss. I hung up, but I knew this was just the beginning. Isabella's family was mobilizing for war, and they had no idea that I was already 3 steps ahead of them, or that their daughter's criminal conspiracy was about to explode in ways that would make my missing furniture seem trivial by comparison. The cease and desist letter arrived at my clinic on Wednesday morning, delivered by certified mail with all the theatrical drama Isabella's lawyer could muster. Demand for immediate cessation of harassment and return of property was printed in bold across legal letterhead that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I read it during my lunch break while eating a sandwich in my office, and I had to admire the sheer audacity of Isabella's legal strategy. According to her attorney, Marcus Delacroix Sq., I had committed theft by unlawfully removing and secreting personal property belonging to Ms. Isabella Maria Santos, engaged in intentional infliction of emotional distress through abandonment and financial coercion, and was guilty of violating attorney-client privilege by accessing private legal documents. That last part was particularly creative since Isabella's journal wasn't remotely close to attorney-client privilege, but I suppose desperation made people reach for any legal theory that sounded threatening. The letter demanded immediate return of all her belongings, payment of $10,000 in damages for emotional distress, and cessation of all harassing and intimidating behavior. It also threatened criminal charges for theft if I didn't comply within 48 hours. I called my own lawyer, Janet Chen, who'd handled my grandmother's estate and had become a family friend over the years. Janet was known for her calm, methodical approach and her absolute intolerance for legal theatrics. "Kyle, this letter is mostly bluster," she said after I faxed it to her office. "They're trying to intimidate you into backing down, but they don't have a strong legal position. You documented everything properly, used licensed professionals for the moving, and you're holding the property pending payment of legitimate debts. That's completely legal. What about the criminal theft charges they're threatening? Empty threats. You didn't steal anything. You removed your own belongings from a shared residence and arranged professional storage for hers pending debt resolution. Any prosecutor would laugh them out of the office." But Janet's tone grew more serious. "However, Kyle, I need to ask you something important. In that journal, did Isabella mention any actual business activities? Any meetings with investors or partnerships that might already be in motion?" I felt my stomach drop. In all my focus on Isabella's betrayal and the logistics of protecting myself, I hadn't fully considered that her plan with Diego might already be underway. She mentioned approaching investors after my promotion, but I assumed that was still in the planning stages. Why? Because if they've already started soliciting investments using fraudulent information, including your professional credentials, this becomes a much more serious legal matter. We're not just talking about a relationship dispute anymore, Kyle. We're talking about active investor fraud. That afternoon, I did something I'd been avoiding since leaving Isabella. I checked her social media accounts. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 days ago, the same day I'd discovered her journal, Isabella had posted a professional-looking announcement about Santos Rodriguez Wellness Retreats, featuring photos of her with a man I didn't recognize but could only assume was Diego. The post included testimonials from satisfied clients, pictures of luxury retreat facilities, and most damaging, a bio section that listed Dr. Kyle Morrison, DVM, senior partner, as their medical advisory board chairman, without my knowledge or consent. They weren't planning to start their fraud scheme after my promotion. They were already implementing it, using my name and credentials to legitimize their fake business while I'd been completely unaware. I immediately called Janet back. "They're already running the scam. They're using my professional license and credentials in their marketing materials without my permission. Forward me everything immediately. Kyle, this is identity theft and professional impersonation. We need to act fast before they take money from actual investors." I spent the next 2 hours documenting everything. Isabella's social media posts, the fake business website that had somehow been registered 3 weeks ago, and promotional materials that featured my photo and credentials prominently. But the most chilling discovery came when I found their investment opportunities page, which listed 3 upcoming presentations to potential investor groups, including one scheduled for this Friday with something called the Thornfield Investment Group. A quick internet search revealed that Margaret Thornfield was a notoriously sharp businesswoman who'd made her fortune identifying and investing in legitimate wellness companies. She was also famous for her zero-tolerance policy toward fraud and had personally prosecuted several investment scammers who tried to deceive her organization. Isabella and Diego had no idea they were about to walk into a trap of their own making. I worked until 3 a.m. that night creating what I called the Isabella Files, a comprehensive evidence package that would make her deception crystal clear to anyone who reviewed it. Every page of her journal was photographed in high resolution, cross-referenced with timestamps and organized chronologically to show the evolution of her criminal planning. I included financial records showing her pattern of unpaid debts, screenshots of her fake business website featuring my credentials without permission, and a detailed timeline proving she'd been implementing her fraud scheme while pretending to love me. Janet had told me that Margaret Thornfield appreciated thoroughness above all else, so I treated this like the most important veterinary case file of my career. The evidence package was 63 pages when I finished, professionally bound with numbered sections and a comprehensive index. I included everything. Isabella's handwritten calculations of my net worth, her cruel mockery of my grandfather's metals, her partnership agreements with Diego, and most damning, proof that they were already using my professional license to legitimize their fake business. But the real breakthrough came when I started researching Diego Rodriguez more thoroughly. A simple background check revealed that Diego Martinez Rodriguez had been arrested in Arizona 18 months ago for investment fraud involving a fake renewable energy company. The charges were ultimately dropped due to prosecutorial mistakes, but the case files were public record. Diego had used the exact same playbook with Isabella that he tried in Arizona. Find a legitimate professional to provide credibility, create impressive marketing materials featuring luxury facilities they didn't own, and target wealthy investors with promises of high returns in trendy industries. Isabella might have thought she was Diego's partner, but the pattern suggested she was just his latest mark, someone with access to a professional's credentials and a genuine relationship that could provide cover for his operations. I printed Diego's arrest records and included them in the evidence package, along with a detailed comparison showing how his current scheme with Isabella matched his previous criminal activities. The parallels were so obvious that any competent investigator would immediately recognize Diego as a repeat offender who'd simply moved to a new state and found a new accomplice. Thursday morning, I called Janet with my findings. Janet, Diego's got a criminal record for the exact same type of fraud he's running with Isabella. She has no idea she's working with a professional con artist who's been using this playbook before. Kyle, this changes everything. If Diego has prior arrests for investment fraud, he could be violating parole conditions by engaging in similar activities. We need to get this information to the right people immediately. What's our next move? I'm calling Margaret Thornfield this morning. She and I served on a legal ethics committee together 5 years ago, and she'll absolutely want to see this evidence before tomorrow's meeting. Mrs. Thornfield has personally prosecuted investment fraudsters before, and she has resources that can shut down operations like this within hours. That afternoon, I drove to Janet's office where we prepared the final evidence package using her law firm's professional presentation materials. Everything was organized in clear plastic sleeves, with executive summaries highlighting the most critical evidence. We prepared 3 identical packages, one for Margaret Thornfield, one for the State Attorney General's office, and one for my own records. Kyle, I want you to understand something important, Janet said as we sealed the packages. Once we deliver this evidence, there's no going back. Isabella will face serious criminal charges for identity theft and investor fraud. Diego will likely be arrested for parole violations. This will destroy their lives completely. I thought about Isabella's journal, her calculations about selling my grandfather's Purple Heart, her dismissive comments about my expensive pet hobby dreams. Janet, they were planning to destroy innocent investors' lives to fund their fake lifestyle. Isabella was planning to steal my inheritance and family heirlooms to finance their exit strategy. I'm not destroying their lives, I'm protecting everyone they intended to victimize. We arranged for bonded courier delivery to Margaret Thornfield's private office, with confirmation of receipt required. The package included a cover letter from Janet explaining the urgency of the situation and requesting an immediate meeting to discuss the fraudulent investor presentation scheduled for the following day. My phone rang at 6:47 p.m. Unknown number, but Janet had warned me that Margaret Thornfield might call directly if the evidence package was as compelling as we believed it was. Dr. Morrison? This is Margaret Thornfield. I've reviewed your evidence package, and I need to meet with you first thing tomorrow morning. My office, 8 a.m. sharp. Her voice was crisp, professional, and absolutely furious. Of course, Mrs. Thornfield. I'll be there. Dr. Morrison, in 30 years of business, I've never seen documentation this thorough or evidence this damning. Your former girlfriend and her partner have made a catastrophic mistake by targeting my investment group. I could hear the controlled rage in her voice, the tone of someone who'd built an empire by recognizing and destroying threats to legitimate business. Tomorrow's presentation is going to be very educational for Ms. Santos and Mr. Rodriguez. Very educational indeed. Margaret Thornfield's office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and furnishings that probably cost more than my annual salary. When I arrived at exactly 8 a.m. Friday morning, she was already reviewing my evidence package with 2 other people, a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as her head of security, and a woman taking detailed notes who turned out to be from the district attorney's office. Mrs. Thornfield was exactly what I'd expected, sharp-eyed, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of controlled authority that comes from decades of making high-stakes business decisions. She looked up from the journal photographs with an expression that could have frozen lava. Dr. Morrison, your former girlfriend has made what I can only describe as a catastrophically stupid decision. Not only did she target my investment group for fraud, but she documented her criminal intentions in writing and left the evidence where you could find it. I was as shocked as you are, I said. I had no idea she was capable of something like this. Ms. Santos and Mr. Rodriguez are scheduled to present their fake wellness retreat proposal to my board at 2 p.m. today. They believe they're walking into a room full of wealthy investors eager to fund their fraudulent operation. Instead, they'll be walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. The security chief, introduced as Frank Morrison, no relation despite the name, leaned forward. Dr. Morrison, we've been monitoring their activities since receiving your evidence package. Diego Rodriguez violated his parole by crossing state lines and engaging in investment fraud activities. We've coordinated with Arizona authorities, and there's already a warrant out for his arrest. What about Isabella? I asked. Ms. Santos will be charged with identity theft, professional impersonation, and conspiracy to commit fraud, the district attorney representative said. Using your veterinary credentials without permission to legitimize a fraudulent investment scheme is a felony in this state. The evidence you provided is more than sufficient for conviction. Margaret Thornfield stood up and walked to her windows, looking out over the city with the satisfaction of a predator who'd cornered her prey. Dr. Morrison, I've built my career on identifying legitimate investment opportunities and protecting my clients from fraud. In 30 years, I've prosecuted dozens of criminals who tried to deceive my organization. But I've never encountered documentation as thorough as what you provided, or criminals foolish enough to leave such detailed evidence of their intentions. They got overconfident, I said. Isabella thought she had me completely fooled, and Diego probably assumed his previous charges being dropped meant he was untouchable. Their overconfidence will be their downfall. At 2 p.m. today, Ms. Santos and Mr. Rodriguez will walk into our main conference room expecting to present their fraudulent proposal to potential investors. Instead, they'll find Detective Sarah Walsh from the Fraud Division, Agent Michael Chin from the State Attorney General's office, and myself, along with complete documentation of their criminal activities. The thought of Isabella's face when she realized she'd walked into a law enforcement trap instead of a business meeting was almost satisfying enough to make up for 2 years of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. Almost. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing more than you've already provided. Your evidence package was so comprehensive that we have everything needed for prosecution. However, I do want to make you an offer. Mrs. Thornfield returned to her desk and pulled out a business card. Dr. Morrison, your analytical skills and attention to detail are exactly what my organization needs. I'd like you to consider consulting for Thornfield Investments, helping us identify potential fraud schemes before they can target our clients. The pay is excellent, and you'd be protecting legitimate businesses from predators like your former girlfriend. I stared at the card, realizing that Isabella's betrayal had inadvertently opened a door to opportunities I'd never imagined. I'm honored by the offer, Mrs. Thornfield. Can I think about it? Of course, but don't think too long. A talent like yours is rare. At 11 a.m., my phone started ringing. Isabella, calling from a number I hadn't blocked yet, probably panicking as she realized that her fake business website had been taken down overnight and their social media accounts had been suspended. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her frantic message. Kyle, something terrible is happening. Our business website disappeared, and Diego is freaking out about some problem with the investors. I think someone is sabotaging us. You have to help me figure out what's going on. Please call me back immediately. Her desperation was almost funny. Isabella had no idea that her sabotage was actually law enforcement dismantling her criminal operation piece by piece, or that in 3 hours she'd be walking into handcuffs instead of a business meeting. I deleted the voicemail without responding. At 1:45 p.m., I was back in Mrs. Thornfield's office, watching through security cameras as Isabella and Diego entered the building lobby. Isabella was dressed in her most professional outfit, carrying a leather portfolio and practically glowing with excitement about the big presentation that would launch her fake business career. Diego looked nervous, checking his phone constantly and glancing around like he sensed something was wrong. They took the elevator to the conference room level, chatting confidently about their presentation strategy, completely unaware that they were being recorded and that law enforcement officers were waiting for them just down the hall. Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Thornfield said, would you like to witness justice being served? I thought about Isabella's journal, her plans to sell my grandfather's metals, her dismissive attitude toward my dreams and career. Yes, I would. We watched through the conference room security feed as Isabella and Diego walked in expecting to meet wealthy investors. Instead, they found Detective Walsh, Agent Chin, and Mrs. Thornfield herself, along with complete documentation of their fraudulent schemes spread across the conference table. The look on Isabella's face when she realized what was happening was absolutely priceless, pure shock, followed by panic, then desperate attempts to maintain her composure as the walls of her fake empire came crashing down around her. Diego tried to run and was immediately arrested by security officers positioned at every exit. Isabella's legs actually gave out when Detective Walsh read her rights, and she had to be helped into a chair before being handcuffed and led away. Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Thornfield said as we watched Isabella being escorted to a police car, "That's what happens to people who mistake kindness for weakness and generosity for stupidity. Your former girlfriend learned today that actions have consequences, and those consequences can be absolutely devastating when you target the wrong people." The aftermath unfolded faster than I could have imagined. Within 24 hours of Isabella and Diego's arrests, my phone was ringing with calls from people I'd never expected to hear from again. The first was Carmen, Isabella's sister, who'd lectured me about abandoning my responsibilities just 2 weeks earlier. "Kyle, I owe you the biggest apology of my life," she said, her voice thick with shame and disbelief. "I had no idea what Isabella was really doing. Mom and Dad are devastated. They're paying your $7,247 debt in full today and arranging for Isabella's belongings to be moved back to their house. We're so sorry we didn't believe you." The family that had rallied to defend Isabella's honor was now scrambling to distance themselves from her criminal activities. Elena, Isabella's mother, called that evening with a voice I barely recognized, broken, humiliated, completely different from the fierce defender who'd berated me at my workplace. "Kyle, Mijo, I don't know how to apologize for what my daughter did to you, or for how we treated you when you tried to tell us the truth. Isabella lied to us about everything. We thought you were just angry about some relationship fight. We had no idea she was planning to steal from you." The most satisfying call came from Isabella herself, using her one permitted phone call from jail to beg me to help her. "Kyle, please, you have to help me. This is all a misunderstanding. Diego manipulated me into this whole thing. I never wanted to hurt you. I was going to give you back your money, I swear. You know me, Kyle. I'm not a criminal." "Isabella," I said calmly, "I know exactly who you are. I have 63 pages of evidence proving it. Please don't let them destroy my life over some stupid mistakes. I love you, Kyle. I was going to propose to you after your promotion. We can still have the future we planned together if you just help me get out of this." The desperation in her voice was absolute, but I felt nothing except mild curiosity about how someone could be so delusional even when facing felony charges. "Isabella, you documented plans to steal my inheritance, sell my grandfather's war medals, and use my professional credentials for fraud. That's not love, and those aren't mistakes. Those are crimes. But I never actually did any of those things. It was just planning, just ideas I was considering. You can't ruin someone's life over thoughts they wrote in a private journal. You did do those things. You used my credentials without permission, created a fake business using my professional license, and were actively defrauding investors. The journal was just evidence of your premeditation." I hung up and immediately accepted Margaret Thornfield's consulting offer. The next morning, I was sitting in her office reviewing investment proposals and helping her team identify potential fraud schemes. The irony wasn't lost on me. Isabella's betrayal had led directly to the most interesting and lucrative career opportunity of my life. 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected visitor at my veterinary clinic. Diego's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender named James McCarthy, sat across from my desk with a plea agreement in his hands. "Dr. Morrison, my client wants to cooperate fully with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. He's prepared to provide detailed information about other fraud schemes he's aware of, including evidence that could help convict Isabella of additional crimes you weren't even aware of." "What additional crimes?" "Ms. Santos has been running smaller scams for months, using information she gained from your relationship. She's been approaching your veterinary clients, claiming to represent your practice in fundraising for a fake animal sanctuary expansion. She's collected almost $8,000 from people who thought they were supporting your work." My blood ran cold. Isabella had been using my reputation and my clients' trust in me to run side scams while planning her bigger investment fraud. She'd put my professional license and my relationship with clients at risk for what amounted to pocket change compared to her main scheme. Mr. McCarthy, your client's cooperation is appreciated. I'll make sure my clients know they were victimized by Isabella's fraud, not by any legitimate fundraising associated with my practice. 6 months after Isabella's arrest, I was standing in the lobby of my new animal sanctuary, purchased with my grandmother's inheritance money and funded by my consulting work with Margaret Thornfield. The facility was everything I'd dreamed about: spacious enclosures for rescue animals, a modern veterinary surgical suite, and educational programs for local schools. Isabella had mocked these plans in her journal as Kyle's expensive pet hobby, but it had become the most fulfilling work of my career. The grand opening was attended by Margaret Thornfield herself, along with dozens of my veterinary clients, my family, and several reporters covering the story of how an investment fraud scheme had accidentally led to the creation of a legitimate animal welfare facility. Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Thornfield said as we cut the ribbon, "It's amazing how something that started with such betrayal and criminality has resulted in something so positive for the community." She was right. Isabella's attempt to destroy my financial security had instead led me to discover capabilities I'd never known I had, career opportunities I'd never imagined, and the resources to fulfill dreams she tried to steal from me. That evening, as I walked through my animal sanctuary listening to the sounds of rescued animals settling into their new homes, I realized I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. Isabella had tried to reduce me to nothing more than a financial resource to be exploited. Instead, she'd inadvertently revealed my true value as someone capable of building something meaningful that would benefit others for years to come.